There is a decision that Dallas Jenkins made for Season 6 of The Chosen that almost nobody is talking about. It is quiet, it is hidden in plain sight, and it reframes everything you are about to experience in Episode 1. While the entire world is focused on the story, the production team slipped in a creative choice so deliberately precise, so poetically intentional, that once you truly see it, you cannot unsee it. And what it reveals about this trial scene, and about who Jesus really is in this moment, is something that will sit with you long after the episode ends. Season 6 of The Chosen is not like anything that came before it, not just in terms of story, but in terms of how it was made, what it cost the people who made it, and the deliberately unsettling choices baked into every frame before a single line of dialogue is spoken. This is a season built on darkness, real, literal, physical darkness. And that choice is absolutely no accident. Dallas Jenkins made a creative decision that most showrunners would never dare to attempt, and it connects directly to Episode 1 in a way that is going to hit viewers like a freight train. Episode 1 is about the trial of Jesus. It is about a night that moved from one courthouse to another, from one kind of power to the next, from one betrayal to another. But underneath that story, in the silences, in the location choices, in the words that are not said, there is a layer of meaning that most viewers are going to miss entirely. This video is about those hidden layers, and by the end of it, you will never watch this episode the same way again. To understand what Episode 1 of Season 6 is doing to you as a viewer, you first need to appreciate something that is almost without precedent in the history of television storytelling. Dallas Jenkins made the decision to set the entire season inside a single day. Not a single episode, an entire season. 24 hours. One revolution of the earth. And within those 24 hours, he and his writers made the further decision that the season would begin, and for most of its running time would remain, inside the darkness of night. Think about what that means when you fully sit with it. 6 complete seasons of storytelling, 6 seasons of building characters from scratch, building relationships and conflicts, and moments of doubt and faith, of miracles witnessed and rejected and questioned. All of it was always moving, like a river finding its inevitable course toward this one night. And what a night it is. If you read the Gospels carefully, particularly the account laid out in John chapters 13 through 19, you see that the events of Jesus' final evening and the long, dark hours that followed were absolutely relentless. They did not give him a single breath of peace. From the moment the armed guards arrived in the Garden of Gethsemane to the moment the cross was finally raised on the hill of Golgotha, there was no pause, no mercy, no space for anything to stop and be processed. It was one institution after another, one interrogation after another, one humiliation layered on top of the last. And The Chosen is going to put you inside all of it, not as a comfortable observer watching from the outside, but as someone living in the darkness alongside the people who were actually there. Episode 1 begins in the shadow of the garden. Gethsemane is already behind us when the episode opens. That devastating moment. The prayer, the sweat that fell like drops of blood. The disciples who could not stay awake. The surrender of a will that had every right to resist. That is already in the past. Jesus has already said, "Not my will, but yours be done." He has already accepted the full weight of what is coming. And now he is being led through the narrow, sleeping streets of Jerusalem in the deep of night, surrounded by armed guards, his hands bound, moving toward a building where a man who has already decided his fate is waiting to ask him questions he already knows the answers to. The story of Episode 1 is already in motion before the first scene begins. The first stop is Annas, and this is a detail that is deceptively easy to overlook, but it is essential to understanding what the entire trial is really about. Annas is not the current high priest at this point in the story. He was removed from that position by the Romans years earlier. But in the deeply entangled world of first-century Jewish religious politics, that removal meant almost nothing when it came to real, functioning power. Annas was the patriarch of the most powerful priestly dynasty in Jerusalem. 5 of his sons had served as high priests after him. His son-in-law Caiaphas currently held the official Tatufo title. Every corridor of religious power in this city ran through Annas in some way. When Annas spoke, the machinery of the entire establishment moved in response. He was the shadow government behind every official throne. And tonight, on this specific night, he wants to examine Jesus before anyone else does. The questioning begins. It is careful, probing, strategic. Annas asks about the disciples. Who are they? How many? What is the breadth of this network? He asks about the teachings. What exactly has Jesus been saying to the people? And more importantly, what has he been saying about the establishment? He is building a case in real time, looking for the angle that will stick. And what Jesus does in response is one of the most quietly extraordinary moments in the entire gospel narrative. He does not deflect. He does not try to negotiate. He does not lower his eyes or soften his voice to accommodate the power standing over him. He simply holds a mirror up to the sheer absurdity of this situation. He says, in effect, "Why are you asking me these questions in the dark, as though I have been hiding something? I have taught openly, in temples, in synagogues, in public spaces where anyone could hear me. I have concealed nothing. Go and ask the people who heard me. They know exactly what I said." That answer is not just logical. It is almost impossibly calm. Jesus is standing before one of the most powerful men in Jerusalem, in the dead of night, under arrest, with no advocate and no legal protection. And he speaks with the quiet authority of someone who knows precisely who he is and understands exactly why he is standing here. And it infuriates the soldier standing nearby enough that the man steps forward and strikes Jesus across the face, a physical blow, sudden and sharp, for the crime of telling the truth. When that moment plays on screen, it is going to stop viewers in their tracks, because they have followed Jesus through 5 full seasons now. They have watched him perform miracles that left the disciples breathless. They have watched him speak with an authority that silenced rooms full of educated, powerful men. They have watched him raise Lazarus from the dead. And now they are watching someone hit him in the face, and he does not retaliate. He does not collapse. He does not react the way every human instinct would demand. He simply asks a question in return, with complete composure. If I said something wrong, tell me what the error was. But if I told the truth, then explain why you hit me. The logic is so clean and so devastating that it lands like its own kind of blow on the audience watching. After Annas gets nowhere useful, Jesus is handed to Caiaphas. And this is where the full, terrifying machinery of organized religious power kicks into motion. Caiaphas has assembled the Sanhedrin, the supreme ruling council of Jewish religious and legal leadership, in the middle of the night. This assembly itself is a detail worth pausing on, because Jewish law had very precise, very strict rules about when and how capital cases could be considered. Night sessions for capital crimes were explicitly and clearly prohibited. The Sanhedrin was supposed to meet only during daylight hours, only in their designated chambers, only after proper and orderly procedures had been observed. Every single one of those rules is being violated tonight. And the supreme irony is almost too heavy to carry. The people most publicly, most vehemently committed to the law of God are shattering their own law in their desperate rush to destroy the man they are afraid of. Witnesses are produced, one after another, and the testimony falls apart in real time. The stories contradict each other. The accusations do not align. Under any proper application of Jewish law, this collapse of witness testimony would have ended the proceedings entirely and required Jesus' release. But this is not a real trial. It has never been a real trial. It is a performance, a show of process assembled to produce a predetermined conclusion. Caiaphas watches the chaos and makes a decision. He is finished with the pretense. He walks directly to the center of the room, looks Jesus in the eye, and asks the one question that all of this has been designed to reach. Are you the Messiah? Are you the Son of the living God? And Jesus answers, not with silence, not with deflection. He answers. He says yes, but in a way that reaches far beyond any simple affirmation into something cosmic and eternal. He tells them that they will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven. He is not merely confirming a title. He is making a declaration about the fundamental nature of reality itself. He is telling this council that the power structure they think they are operating inside is not the real power structure. And in that moment, surrounded by men who have already made their decision, Jesus speaks a truth so complete that they have no category in which to receive it. Caiaphas tears his robes. The charge is blasphemy. The verdict is death. And here is where the story takes its first sharp turn into the political world, because the Sanhedrin does not actually have the legal authority to execute anyone. The Romans stripped that power from the Jewish council years earlier. If they want Jesus dead, and they very much do, they need Roman authorization, and that means a second trial, with a second interrogator, before the man who holds actual life and death authority over every soul in this occupied province, Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor. The move into Pilate's presence shifts the entire tone and weight of the episode. Pilate is not a religious man. He has no personal investment in Jewish theological debates about the Messiah. What he has is a deeply pragmatic need to keep his province calm, especially during Passover, when Jerusalem is packed with pilgrims and tensions run dangerously high. When he looks at Jesus, something he cannot entirely explain makes him uneasy. He questions him. He asks directly whether Jesus claims to be the King of the Jews, and Jesus answers in that same layered, precise way that Pilate cannot quite grasp and cannot quite dismiss. Pilate searches for a crime and finds nothing. He says publicly, more than once, that he finds no fault in this man. But instead of releasing him, he finds a procedural door. Jesus is Galilean, and Herod Antipas has jurisdiction over Galileans and is in Jerusalem for Passover. So Pilate sends Jesus to Herod, and for the third time that night, Jesus is moved through the dark streets of a sleeping city under armed guard, toward another powerful man who is about to discover that he cannot get from Jesus what he wants. Herod Antipas has been curious about Jesus for years. He has heard the stories. He has likely wondered what Jesus would look like standing in front of him with nowhere to go. And so when Jesus arrives, Herod begins asking questions with something almost like excitement. And Jesus gives him nothing. Not one word, not a single syllable. The silence in that room is so complete and so deliberate that it becomes its own kind of statement. And we will talk about exactly what that statement means in just a moment, because that silence is the most important hidden detail in this entire episode. Most viewers watching episode 1 are going to experience it as an intense, emotionally overwhelming piece of television. They are going to be moved by the performances, shaken by the injustice, devastated by the chasm between what Jesus deserves and what he receives. All of that is exactly what the show intends. But layered inside this episode, some on screen, some behind the camera, some in the decisions that were made long before a single scene was written, there are details that most viewers are going to completely miss. And those details are not footnotes. They are the architecture on which the entire meaning of this story rests. The first and most significant hidden detail is Jesus' silence before Herod Antipas. And to understand why it matters so deeply, you have to go further back than the Gospel of Luke. You have to go back to the book of Isaiah, written more than 700 years before this night. In Isaiah chapter 53, in one of the most startling prophecies in all of Scripture, the prophet describes a servant who would be oppressed and afflicted, who would be led like a lamb to the slaughter, and who would not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth. This prophecy was written centuries before Jesus was born. And on this specific night, in this specific room, standing before Herod Antipas, with every reason in the world to speak, to argue, to defend himself, to perform a miracle and silence the mockery, Jesus chooses absolute silence. Every word he does not say is a fulfillment of something written in the ancient text. His silence is not helplessness. It is not trauma response. It is a precise, deliberate, theologically loaded choice that says, I know exactly where I am in this story, and I know exactly what this moment requires. But there is a layer beyond even that. The transcript of a video analyzing this episode includes a line from the source material that most viewers are going to absorb, without fully stopping to think about what it means. Jesus remained silent before Herod, knowing that no word would be enough to change their minds. And even more important than that, knowing that they are not worthy of his words. Read that again. He is not silent because he is overwhelmed or afraid. He is not silent because he cannot find the words. He is silent because he has made the judgment that Herod Antipas, the man who beheaded John the Baptist for the entertainment of a crowd, does not deserve the gift of truth spoken directly to him. Jesus spent his entire ministry pouring words of life into anyone who would receive them. Herod has already demonstrated, in the most brutal way imaginable, that he is not someone who receives truth. He is someone who destroys it. And so, Jesus gives him nothing. That distinction between silence as defeat and silence as an act of deliberate withholding is something that the chosen has the capacity to show, in a way that no other medium could. Jonathan Roumie can carry that distinction in his eyes, in the set of his jaw, in the way he stands. And when viewers understand what that silence truly means, the scene transforms from something that might look passive into something that is quietly, devastatingly powerful. The second hidden detail is the one that Dallas Jenkins embedded into the production itself, and it is perhaps the most poetically intentional decision made in the entire history of this show. Almost the entire season was filmed at night. The cast and crew worked through the overnight hours, shooting in real darkness, building the world of this story in the same physical conditions, in which the story actually occurred. Think about what that means from a purely historical and spiritual standpoint. The betrayal of Jesus happened at night. The arrest happened at night. The trial before Annas happened at night. The Sanhedrin session under Caiaphas happened at night. Peter's denial happened in the dark, by a fire in a courtyard, while the trial was still ongoing inside. These are events that the gospel writers themselves record as happening under the cover of darkness, a darkness that was not merely atmospheric, but was deeply symbolic, representing the powers and structures of this world, doing their work from the scrutiny of daylight. And now the Chosen has filmed it in that same darkness. The eerie, haunting energy that audiences will feel watching Episode 1 is not manufactured in post-production. It was built into the physical reality of how the season was made. The actors carried that weight. The camera operators worked in it. And that authenticity is going to come through on screen in a way that no amount of color grading or lighting tricks could replicate. There is a third hidden detail that connects The Chosen to something much older and much larger than itself, and it has to do with geography. The production filmed the crucifixion scenes in Matera, Italy, and that name might sound familiar, because it should. Matera is the exact location where Mel Gibson shot The Passion of the Christ in 2004. This is not a minor coincidence in the world of biblical filmmaking. Matera is a city built into ancient rock caves and stone formations, a place whose very geology feels like it exists outside of ordinary time. When you walk its streets, you are walking through something that looks and feels genuinely ancient in a way that most locations simply cannot achieve. The Chosen's production team chose this place deliberately, and in doing so, they placed their work in a lineage with one of the most viscerally powerful depictions of the crucifixion ever committed to film. There is a historical and spiritual weight to that location that seeps into every frame shot there. And when viewers see those crucifixion scenes, in theaters, as a full-length film, on a screen designed to hold the scale of the story, they will be receiving something that was captured in a place that has carried this particular story before. The fourth hidden detail in Episode 1 is about the trial itself, and it is something that even many regular churchgoers do not fully understand. The trial of Jesus was not a single event. It unfolded in stages, across multiple jurisdictions and multiple power structures, and at each stage, it was marked by a different kind of injustice. Before Annas, it was the injustice of informal power used without accountability. Before Caiaphas and the Sanhedrin, it was the injustice of a legal system deliberately violated by the very people sworn to uphold it. Before Pilate, it was the injustice of political cowardice. Before Herod, it was the injustice of curiosity treated as entertainment. And then, back before Pilate again, the injustice of a crowd's voice overriding an individual conscience. 5 distinct failures of 5 distinct systems of human power, all in a single night. The Chosen has the space and the skill to show each of those failures clearly and distinctly, which means that Episode 1 could be one of the most comprehensive dramatizations of systemic human failure ever put on a television screen. And most viewers will watch it as a story about one man, rather than seeing the architecture underneath. The fifth detail is one that The Chosen itself is adding that is not strictly laid out in Scripture, and it is one of the most humanly interesting choices the show makes. According to what has been previewed and discussed by the production team, the apostles, the disciples, the people who have followed Jesus and learned from him and loved him for years, will attempt to defend him during the trial. They will do their best to speak on his behalf, to intervene in some way, to push back against what is being done to him. And Jesus, knowing that no word spoken by anyone in that environment is going to change what is going to happen, remains silent. He lets it unfold. He accepts it. And somewhere in that contrast, between the desperation of the people who love him trying to stop this and the absolute peace of the man at the center of it, there is a depth of emotion and meaning that is going to be almost unbearable to watch. Now, this is where we move from what is confirmed into the territory of what is possible, what is likely, and what could make episode 1 of season 6 something that people are still talking about years from now. These are theories. They are grounded in what we know from the production and from the source material, but they are presented as possibilities, not certainties. And some of them, if they turn out to be true, would make this episode genuinely landmark television. The first and most compelling theory is about Peter. We know that Peter follows Jesus to the high priest's courtyard after the arrest. We know that he is there during the trial, not inside the hall where the proceedings are happening, but in the outer courtyard, waiting, probably not entirely sure why he has stayed when everyone else has run. And we know, because the gospel tells us very plainly, that before the night is over, Peter will deny 3 times that he even knows Jesus. The rooster will crow, and Peter will be shattered. But The Chosen has never been a show that simply presents events. It has always been a show that asks what the inside of those events looks like. What is Peter thinking during the hours before the denial? He has been one of the most passionate, most outspoken, most physically willing to act disciples in the entire group. He cut off a guard's ear in the garden just hours before this. He is not a man who runs from confrontation. And yet something happens between that moment of physical bravery and the moment he tells a servant girl that he does not know the man on trial inside. Something changes, or something breaks, or something in Peter chooses self-preservation over loyalty in a way that even Peter himself will not be able to fully explain afterward. It is very possible that The Chosen uses episode 1 to build that entire interior arc for Peter. He could be shown watching from the courtyard, catching fragments of what is happening inside, wrestling with the desire to do something and the growing, terrifying awareness that there is nothing to do. He might be shown seeing Jesus through a doorway, or hearing shouts from inside, or watching guards laugh and push Jesus around. And that slow accumulation of witnessing helplessness, that creeping, awful realization that the situation is completely beyond his ability to control or fix. This could be what The Chosen builds as the emotional architecture for his denial. Because the denial is not really about cowardice in a simple, one-dimensional sense. It is about the complete collapse of a very specific kind of faith, the kind that believed Jesus was about to do something dramatic to reverse all of this. When Peter finally understands that the reversal is not coming, something in him goes somewhere dark. And The Chosen could be the first depiction of this story ever made that actually shows us that collapse in real time. The second theory involves Judas. After the betrayal in the garden, Judas disappears from the immediate narrative. He has done what he agreed to do. He has led the soldiers to Jesus. The 30 pieces of silver are in his possession. And now, while the trial is grinding through its phases, Judas is somewhere in Jerusalem with nothing to do but think about what he has set in motion. The gospel account tells us that Judas eventually returns the money, saying that he has betrayed innocent blood, and that when the religious leaders dismiss him with contempt, he goes and hangs himself. But that final act does not happen immediately. There is time. There are hours. And those hours, in which Judas's understanding of what he has done begins to solidify into something he cannot carry, are hours that the chosen has every creative reason to explore. It is entirely possible, even probable, that Episode 1 will give us moments of Judas during the trial, not at the center of the action, but on the edges of it. Perhaps he is watching from a distance, not able to see what is happening inside, but able to see the guards, able to see the lights in the windows, able to piece together from the sounds and the movements that this is not going the way he may have imagined it going. The theory that Judas expected Jesus to do something, to respond, to resist, to call on the power everyone had seen him exercise, is one that has been explored by theologians for centuries. If Judas had truly wanted Jesus dead, he would not have returned the money and described him as innocent. Something in his understanding of what was supposed to happen did not match what is happening. And watching that gap widen in real time, inside Judas's face and body and silences, could be one of the most quietly devastating threads in the entire episode. The third theory is about Mary Magdalene. Elizabeth Tabish has described filming these sequences as heartbreaking. She said that you are watching someone you love be tortured and mocked and crucified, and that it is awful, even in a scripted setting. That emotional reality from the actress suggests that the chosen is going to give Mary a significant presence during these events. And here is what makes that theoretically interesting. Mary Magdalene, in the Gospel accounts, is one of the few people who stays close to Jesus throughout the crucifixion. While many of the male disciples have scattered, Mary is there. So where is she during the trial? Is she somewhere near the courtyard, like Peter? Is she with the other women followers, moving through the dark city trying to understand what is happening? The chosen could build an entire parallel arc for Mary during Episode 1, one that shows us what loyalty looks like when it has nowhere to go, when there is nothing to do but witness. If the show places Mary close enough to the trial that she can see or hear fragments of it, the emotional stakes become almost unbearable. Because Mary knows what Jesus saved her from. She knows in a way that is profoundly personal what he means. Watching him be struck by a guard, or hearing the crowd's shouts,